Hi team, welcome to this little video. It's just a short video to begin discussions about Assessment 2, which is our literacy unit plan. So it is due in 2 weeks' time, so it doesn't give us much time to have a talk about it in our Thursday classes. So I thought I'd just make a quick video so that you can perhaps spend the next few days having a think about what you want to do, where you need to start, and what things are important to make sure that you include. So let's have a look at the actual planning document or outline that we have been given. So we've got 12,000 words, which is not much considering that we have to plan a 5-day literacy block. So we've got both the reading aspect and the writing aspect as well. Now, speaking and listening will be covered more incidentally throughout your lessons. So in the back of your mind, you're going to have to be saying to yourself, how can I incorporate some elements of speaking and listening into your reading lessons and into your writing lessons? And it's quite easy because if you're doing a guided reading session, the kids will be discussing things and they'll be using their speaking and listening skills. If you're presenting some sort of modeled lesson, the kids will be listening and interacting with you and others in the grade. So it's actually quite easy to cover those speaking and listening aspects of your unit plan. And it's actually more authentic than doing things like oral presentations and things that are a little bit more scripted, I suppose is a good word. So we do need to plan for both reading and writing. It means that we don't have much words to use, so we're going to have to plan in a really succinct way. You can assume that the person or your audience for this assessment already knows a lot about literacy. So assume you were planning in your grade for a CRT or some other teacher to take your grade for you, and they already know what guided reading is. They already know what an independent reading is or an interactive writing session. So assume that the audience has an element of knowledge so that you don't have to re-explain things. So you don't have to explain what guided reading is. You don't have to explain about types of assessment or your inclusive practices. You just have to show that they're there and assume that the reader would know. That's going to save you a lot in terms of word count. So we've got our weekly planner and it's going to be suitable for Foundation 1 or 2. So just choose one of those year levels. And as I said before, you'll focus on reading and writing. It's not a detailed lesson, but we do need to have a logical sequence, which we'll talk about over the next couple of slides. The document will show evidence of catering to a range of modes. Now your modes is just your reading and your writing and your speaking and listening, which we've already talked about there. With a provision for a critical reflection to show evidence of inclusive and anti-bias based thinking. So with your critical reflection, you're going to be connecting to academic evidence to prove that the ideas and elements within your unit plan are best practice. So if you have decided that you are going to get your students to do a shared writing task, why have you chosen that? Is that the best practice for literacy? And yes, we know that it is because it's part of the pedagogy that we're all focusing on. So then you can go to some academic literature that supports that. If you have got the kids collaborating and working in groups and you believe that to be best practice for enhancing people's literacy skills, well then you can find some academic evidence which supports that. So your critical reflection is going to be explaining why your unit uses the pedagogy it does. Why does it use the high impact teaching strategies that it does? How is it inclusive of all kids? And you're going to talk about differentiation as well. Your planning document will communicate how to use information and communication technology. So we had the question on Thursday, did we have to have that in our lesson plan? And it wasn't specifically stated, but this time it is. So sometime over the week, you're going to show me that you can incorporate some ICT into some lesson somewhere. Now, from that statement, it sounds like we're just shoving it in, but it does need to be considered. So how can you use it in a meaningful way, not feeling like we're just sort of popping it there or doing it for the sake of doing it, or we're just shoving a few kids in front of an iPad because we think it's engaging or it gives them something to do. You have to actually use ICT in a way that enhances what you're already trying to achieve. So that's going to be interlaced throughout your program, as well as your brief statement specifying considerations for ethical and safe use of ICT. So you'll just connect to, you won't have much room or word count for this, so please don't spend a lot on it, but you'll just say, if you want them Googling something, what are the safety considerations? But most schools have their own sort of firewalls and blocks anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. Maybe just make sure that your monitoring or roving around could be your solution to that. Let me just brighten my screen, that's a little bit better. We'll talk about more on this on Thursday. It's a lot to get through, but just some key things that I thought you might want to consider while we're planning. Okay, so my next slide says, where do I start? So there's a few things that you need to think about to get yourself started. So choose a focus for reading and choose a focus for writing. They don't need to relate, but if you want to make them relate because you feel like it's a good fit and you can get your content descriptors to work together like that, you might have them relating. For example, you might do some reading of poetry and get some good examples and some good mentor texts and exemplars for the kids in reading of poetry, and then you might decide for writing that you're going to have the writing of poetry so that the ideas in the literacy block are linked. But they don't need to, they could be totally different focused. You could have a reading comprehension focus in reading, and then you could be, in my examples, I've got reading comprehension and then I've got writing and narrative. So two different things. They don't need to relate, but you need to have one reading focus and one writing focus. You can choose your content descriptors, so decide what you're going to focus on within reading and within writing. If you want to keep developing the ideas from the lesson plan, it might be good because you've already started that one, so you could use that one as a lesson and build upon it. If you'd like to try something new, then you'll need to go and choose some content descriptors /S plural on the end. Some content descriptors are quite wordy and quite big, and you could literally teach the whole week through one descriptor, and sometimes you can do more than one. So it just depends on what your focus is about how many you'll have. One really important thing that you need to be able to show in your lessons is the progression of learning. So from Monday to Friday, how have you shown that you're developing the skills and you're developing the ideas over the week? Let's have a look at some examples. Okay, now I know this is for grade 3, but this is what I've been teaching this year. So I wanted to use something that I knew myself and I can talk about with a little bit of experience rather than just grabbing one from the internet and not really knowing much about it. So in order to show a progression of learning, you need to have a development of ideas and a development of skills over the week. So with my reading example, I'm going to focus on inference. And in lesson 1, we began with a very broad idea of inference, and we wanted to be able to give all kids the ability to participate in the lesson and have access to the lesson. So when we're thinking about differentiation and inclusive approaches, this is the way we made our unit inclusive, is by trying not to give an overload of text, not making the week really text heavy. We still wanted to be able to teach kids the skills of inference, but we didn't want them to have to rely on heavy decoding strategies, which would take them away from actually learning the skill. So in the first lesson, there was no text, and we talked about how you can look for clues in images, and a really fun way, which was super engaging and the kids just loved it, was through video advertising. So we got some Super Bowl commercials and we found some really cute ones like this one that is, I think, a cheese company. I'll just move my little screen down a little bit so you can see that Google link about a mouse getting some cheese. You have to watch it. It's pretty funny. So we inferred just from images and just from video, using the skills that you would use in a text, but practicing them in a way that was quite fun, quite engaging, a good way to start the unit to sort of get the kids in. Those ones that were struggling with reading joined in with everybody else and had an absolute ball and didn't feel like they were hindered in their learning because there was no text to read in lesson 1. To build on that, so we've given them just an image and just some video to watch, talking about the skills and then applying them. Lesson 2 was a short paragraph, but it was modeled by me. So I read the paragraph, I modeled the skills of how to infer, I annotated it. The kids just watched me do that. So thinking about that gradual release, I've gone from, and the development of skills, we've gone from images to only a short paragraph and modeled by me. From lesson 3, we still had short paragraphs, a little bit more in depth this time, and this time it was less modeled by me and more of a whole grade shared approach where we all talked about things that we could see in the text and clues that we could see. So we've gone from image and advert, no text at all, to short paragraph modeled by me, to a short text talked about in the whole grade. Coming into Thursday's session, where we started to get the kids to do some more independent work, and by Friday being able to do that independently. It's really important that whatever your focus is, that you keep it going for the week. So we shouldn't have one lesson is about visualizing and one lesson is about phonemic awareness, and one lesson's about spelling, and one lesson's about a different comprehension strategy. So we want to keep that theme of inference going the whole week, but showing the progression of how we're going to do that gradual release and we're going to build on their skills each and every lesson. So they came to the lesson 1 with a little bit of skill, we built on it a little bit more, we built on it a little bit more, built on it a little bit more. Here's our writing example. If you were going to do a narrative writing, you'd want to build on that over the week. So it really irked me in remote learning when I saw my son starting a new story every single day and not really having much focus or rhyme or reason to starting a brand new story every day, because there's no way to develop the skills of writing when you're just writing stories off the cuff for no rhyme or reason. So perhaps a way to do it, and you might come up with something better yourself, is to start with lesson 1 just having a plan or a template where the kids are planning what they're going to write, getting them ideas on characters, getting ideas of the story structure, just planning. Lesson 2 could be just talking about orientation. So you could model what an orientation looks like and how to develop that sizzling start. Then they could work on their complication in lesson 3 and their resolution in lesson 4, and still have time to review and edit in lesson 5. Now, writing's a little bit tricky because you're going to differentiate by grabbing some kids and setting them some goals, perhaps to do with language structures and features, and getting them to increase their use of vocab. Have they considered their audience? Have they considered their story structure? So there could be some teacher conferencing going on in here to sort of set goals for particular students. Okay, so in class we'll have a focus on format and things like that. So I'm just going to get rid of my slides for a moment. Okay, I've just gone out of that and come back in to have a look at some of the planning that happens at my school. I can share this with you If you would like to use it, you can delete stuff out and use your own ideas if you like this format. Now, I have to warn you though that at my school we don't have writing and reading planners that are together. So we have a reading planner with all the reading stuff in it, and then we have a writing planner separate. Every school works differently, and you just get used to what you get used to. But for the sake of our assessment, we need to have both. So you'll have to rejig this if you decide to use something similar. Might be worth having a look at some of the things that Jess and I'll forward the one that Trang sent through as well and see if there's any better formatting. But what's interesting about this is that you can see that, say, in here, which is the body of the lesson, there are a couple of different options of things to do. So you can see how things are differentiated. You can see how every single lesson has the learning intention at the front, and all of the learning intentions should align with what is ultimately the goal of the week. These little pictures in here really help too, because they help to show if you want the kids to do a particular worksheet or a particular game, you can take a little screenshot and pop that in there. That will help so much with your 1200, was it 12 or 1600 word limit? I think it was 1200. So if those little, see how you can be really succinct, you can be really precise with your language and just say exactly what the kids are doing and pop in a little screenshot or pop in a link of what you want the kids to do, and it will just save you so much explaining, because rather than having to explain what the game is, it's just literally there, and you can say play the who, what, when game, and you won't have to spend a lot of time, perhaps words that you don't have, explaining what it is. One last thing I wanted to show you before we finished up is that in your explanation of what's happening in lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. Now, I know that this is a different kind of unit planner and it is week by week, so it's not a good example. But what I did wanted to show you is that things like pedagogical approaches are good if you can highlight their use in the lesson. So instead of saying week 1, week 2, imagine it said lesson 1, lesson 2. And if we were doing something to the whole class or a modeled approach, it always helps if you just highlight it in black or highlight it in bold. And the good thing about that for you guys is that it will help you to see, do I have enough connection to literacy pedagogy? And if you've got those things highlighted, like the students will join in with a modeled reading and you highlight the words modeled reading, it will show you, yep, I do have a strong literacy pedagogy there. I do have them working in pairs, which shows collaborative learning. So if you highlight collaborative learning, worked examples, independent reading, if you highlight all of those sort of key words, you'll be able to look at your 5 lessons over the week and say, yeah, I've got a pretty good spread of good literacy strategies and just things that are just good teaching practice. So I found that that's just a tip. You don't have to do that, but it just helps for you to see that you've covered, you've got a good range of literacy strategies in there as well. We'll talk more about this on Thursday during our lecture. So this is just something to think about and get you started over the weekend. So good luck with it.